Welcome to the Tortoise and Hare Financial Podcast. Your hosts Jim Lau and Ryan Genoe are excited to have Sonia Kociper, a partner at TvH Group and a real estate lawyer at TvH Legal PC, as their special guest. The topic of today's discussion is an important one: how to protect yourself from mortgage and real estate fraud. With the rising popularity of online transactions and the increasing complexity of real estate transactions, it's more important than ever to be aware of the potential risks and take steps to protect yourself. Sonia Kociper is an expert in the field of real estate law and has worked with numerous clients to help them navigate the complexities of real estate transactions. In this episode, she will be sharing her insights and tips on how to protect yourself from mortgage and real estate fraud. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and join us for this informative and insightful discussion on the Tortoise and Hare Financial Podcast.
Powered by Riverside.
Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Tortoise and the Hare Financial Podcast. I'm Jim Leo. I'm your host today. Joining me is my co-host and advisor at TvH Financial, Ryan Genoe. Ryan, how you doing?
Not too bad. Thank you very much. It's great to be back in the co-host seat again. A little bit nerve-wracking being the host last time, so...
Hey, you did fantastic. Don't you worry about that.
Thanks.
And today we're actually joined by a very special guest of ours, Sonia Kociper. Sonia, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks.
Good. And Sonia, for people who don't know, partner at TvH Group for, I believe, well over 10, 12 years now with John, Dave, and I. And also founder and lawyer of TvH Legal Professional Corp. And today we're going to be talking about real estate and mortgage fraud. And Sonia, we have you here to kind of share some points and how people can potentially avoid that, and maybe even identify some issues where they can, again, further avoid it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with maybe some facts and some information that we have in regards to mortgage fraud. So, and just as a reminder to everybody, these points are really just specific to Ontario. So if you're someone that's out of the Ontario jurisdiction, these rules and laws may not apply to you. So we would just encourage you to speak with a lawyer or a local lawyer if you have any questions. So the first thing we're going to discuss is mortgage fraud, and really what is it? And it's a crime that involves misrepresenting or falsifying information on a mortgage application to obtain a loan that would not otherwise be approved. Now, suspected fraudulent mortgage applications actually have increased by about 52% in Canada since 2013, and Ontario really seeing the majority of those cases and increases. Mortgage fraud can also occur when unscrupulous people in the home buying process take advantage of home buyers by charging unlawful fees or inflated interest rates. Mortgage fraud can have serious consequences for homeowners, such as losing their property, damaging their credit rating, facing legal action or criminal charges, and being liable for any outstanding debt. Some examples of recent mortgage fraud cases in Ontario are a Toronto man wanted after allegedly obtaining more than $10 million in fraudulent mortgages by targeting law firms in the Chinese community. A second example, there was a network of real estate agents, mortgage brokers, and bank employees facilitating mortgage fraud for a fee by offering fake employment records, bank statements, and T4s to buyers who would not qualify for a loan. And then finally, and I think this was a more recent case that we've seen in the news, a handful of organized crime groups behind at least 30 cases of title transfer fraud and mortgage fraud in the GTA, where homes were either sold or mortgaged without the owner's knowledge using identity theft scams. Well, scary. So, Sonia, to bring you into this, before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of, mortgage fraud and real estate fraud, why don't you tell the listeners and the viewers a little bit about yourself? Primarily, how did you end up becoming a lawyer? What prompted you to choose that as a profession, and ultimately how it led you to becoming a partner at the TvH Group?
Well, who knows what they want to be at 18? But that's when it all started. I was always told by my dad that I had a lot to say all the time. So I thought the best profession to go into is being a lawyer, because at that time it's only what you see on TV, right?
Right.
The litigators and arguing in court and whatnot. But I actually ended up going into law school and really, really enjoying it, and understanding that there was some areas of law I didn't want to do, and criminal law was one of them. Unfortunately, that kind of finds its way in every avenue of life, but including today. But the getting into real estate is really how, when we all joined forces. So I did some corporate work when I first started in the legal field. I did some municipal work as well. And then when I met you and John, that's when it was a natural sort of addition to my legal practice to also add on the real estate. And that's been what I've been doing for the last, decade now. And yeah.
And you're loving it?
Well, absolutely. Real estate for me has always been a real passion, being, buying real estate, taking a look at, home design and renovations and all the like. So it has been a real passion for me. Being a real estate lawyer has been very rewarding, because it allows me to help clients not only just buy real estate, but realize futures and realize financial future and like equity growth and sort of the strategy behind purchasing property. It isn't just I'm buying a home. You're buying a huge investment that can allow you so many different ways to create wealth and create sort of this longer financial plan for you and your family. So it's very exciting to be in real estate and be able to help clients in different areas of buying real estate.
Yeah, it's we find, Ryan and I, when we're working with clients, the majority of their wealth, of the people that we work with, is tied into real estate, and we think it's going to be moving forward, long term, probably again a source of their biggest wealth, and that's why I think talking about mortgage fraud and real estate fraud is something that people really need to be aware of. I don't think it's really something that people thought of, but recently in the media, it's been spotlighted. There's been some examples, and it's had some major impacts on the victims of mortgage and real estate fraud. So why don't we kind of start off in talking about or understanding what is real estate fraud? So maybe explain some of the most common types of real estate fraud in Ontario.
Well, the most common are title fraud and mortgage fraud, as you noted in your examples earlier. So title fraud, when someone produces illegal fraudulent IDs as well as documentation to ultimately get registered on title, and then there's a change of ownership, and you as the innocent owner of the property no longer own the home. This has increased significantly lately. This type of fraud has always existed. The numbers have gone up because now it's becoming more organized. Now it's becoming a larger pool of people who are getting in on the elaborate schemes. And some can take years to sort of concoct and put together and then ultimately result in millions of dollars. It's very lucrative. So people are starting to get a little bit more savvy with it. And the other type of fraud is mortgage fraud, like you had mentioned earlier, fabricating, again, IDs and mortgage applications, employment records, supporting documentation to ultimately allow a lender to register a mortgage on title, give the lawyer the money who ultimately gives it to the fraudster, and then they run away with it. So,
and what's attributing to the increase? I mean, the stats said since 2013, a 52% increase in Canada, mostly here in Ontario. Do you have any thought on that, on why the increase?
I don't know exactly why, but I have a suspicion that it's because information is easily available. Right. You can go online, you can do a title search on someone's property. As the population keeps getting older, people start to make friends with this older person or couple, and then they start to get in and get information from them, and ultimately are able to gather enough information to do this. Mortgages. There's no mortgages on most of the properties, or very small mortgages on most of the properties that are targeted for this type of fraud. So it's lucrative. So people are going to do, fraudsters are going to go where there's money. It's quick. Most of the time it's easy, especially with a lot of the meetings happening online. ID not being verified properly from the start of the transaction, which is, at the sort of realtor side, all the way through the lenders, through to the lawyers. IDs aren't being analyzed properly. So what's happening is they're just able to get away with it. And then at the end of the day, they're nowhere to be found because they have, this pocket full of money and they can just disappear. So there's like a ghost. Who are you chasing at the end of the day?
So are they targeting the elderly mostly? Are they targeting, again, homeowners that don't have a mortgage on their property?
Right. Because
I think most people assume that everyone has a mortgage in Canada. And I think it's quite opposite. I believe recently there was a stat that about 33% of homeowners in Canada actually hold a mortgage on their property.
Yeah.
Right.
So the target properties are mortgages with low to no mortgages, okay. People who are renting or Airbnb-ing or who are away from the property a majority of the year. And yes, the elderly are being targeted in that capacity of title fraud, but also in other sort of scams as well, where things are being registered on title, and then they're being harassed by this like door-to-door salesman who's now saying that they have a notice of security on their property and they need to refinance to get it off, and they create this urgency and need to pay them off, and they do. They improperly and illegally put on notices of security on some elderly homeowners' title, and now there's creating the urgency to refinance, pay them money so that they can get it off. And a lot of these situations occur without any family members knowing, because most of the time they're being harassed and they're being told, don't tell anybody, you're a bad person, like you can't go, you can't do this, look what you did to yourself, and they're embarrassed, right? So a lot of time they don't seek the help of others to realize that this is not the most legitimate transaction.
So the target. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I was going to say, in our industry, often we're kind of the final say when any large amounts of money are coming and going. We kind of ask the questions, right? Especially of our older clients, but it doesn't just happen to older clients. Do you know of any like red flags? Because for me, if a client comes to me and says, "Hey, I want to take out $20,000 or $30,000," obviously it's their money, but at the same time, it's my obligation to kind of start asking the questions. Asking the questions whether it's staying true to their goal, or if a scam is coming up. And it's actually happened to me a few times where a client has called and said, "Hey, I want to withdraw an X amount of dollars." And of course, it's some second cousin prince to an African, king somewhere overseas. But I become the line of defense for people. Have you discovered, do you know any kind of red flags or strategies to help people kind of prevent these kind of things?
Well, good lawyers always ask questions. And at the end of the day, if a client is refinancing, we always ask, what is the purpose for it? I do. I like to know why my clients are refinancing. I like to know if there's a better way. Most of the time, my clients are referral clients, and they're working with John, who you both know is our partner, and he's a mortgage broker. So I know they've already gone through the strategy and the understanding of what's best for you. And a lot of what's happening with older clients is because they don't have income like they used to, and they're on fixed income. They're not doing the typical refinances with a conventional mortgage. They're doing reverse mortgages. So I would ask, why are you doing this? Like, why are you taking out a traditional mortgage? Why aren't you doing a reverse mortgage? So you'd have to ask these types of questions, but you gotta know, you gotta have the experience, you gotta be aware of these types of things that are coming up that could potentially be a fraudulent situation, right? But I have never encountered a fraudulent transaction, knock on wood, in my entirety of my career, and so and never even a potential one. So just being aware, asking the right questions, knowing what's going on, I think just allows a better service being done to the client, and more questions, more knowledge, I think just helps everyone all around.
And in terms of, people protecting themselves, how can they protect themselves? I know you have said to me title insurance is something that you...
Title insurance.
Yeah. So is that basically, like, how does that work? What is title insurance? And why should someone take on title insurance?
Well, so there's many ways to protect yourself, and the sort of most basic thing is to protect your identity. Don't throw away confidential information in just the garbage can. Shred it. Not scan it. Scan it, yes, put it into your computer, and then shred it. But also, having everything accessible in your computer, have the protection passwords, have all of those things, which are aplenty, in ways that you can protect your financial information. Never, scroll or visit financial websites, like your banking websites or anything, from in unprotected Wi-Fi situations, things like that. But the way to protect yourself ultimately from loss, from the financial loss of a fraud, if it were committed to you, is to obtain title insurance. Okay. And title insurance is an insurance policy that protects property owners, protect their ownership. So, and it includes fraud. All of the title insurance carriers, and there's 5 in Ontario, they include fraud. And, like any insurance company, they're going to go through their investigation, and they're going to, make sure that this is legitimate before they award a claim. But they ultimately, pay out when it's a legitimate claim. In other words, they would pay out the innocent buyer, let's say, because most of the times the trend has actually changed recently, where before everybody was involved in the transaction. Both sellers and buyers were involved, and so they could and it was a private agreement and private lender, etc., and they would all just sort of be involved and dupe every other party, the lawyers and the agents and everything else. What's changing now is that there's an innocent buyer, so it's vendor fraud, where they're fabricating all the necessary IDs and all the documents and all the like, and frauding the innocent buyer. So title insurance protects the innocent buyer, but also in the interim could protect, other parties. Like, say the vendor in this instance were duped, or the property owner, really, if there's an improper mortgage, being placed on title and whatnot, then they are too protected, as well as the lender. So everyone is protected with title insurance against fraud. Most of the time, homeowners don't get title insurance if they don't have a mortgage. I insist that my clients do, because that is the surefire way to protect yourself against the losses associated with this. But they often, don't want to spend the extra $500 to $1,000, and they decline title insurance. When you have a mortgage, it's obligatory for the part of the lender to get title insurance, but not for the owner. So I always advise my clients to actually get title insurance for themselves as well. And one step further, I always tell them, just have a small charge on title. Have a line of credit. Put something on there that the fraudster will have one more layer to go through, so that they can't just, easy peasy register a transfer and essentially lift you of title, void you of title.
Right, so they can have a home equity line of credit registered on title. It won't cost them anything if they don't actually utilize the debt, and it's there, and it's another layer of protection. And I think from my point of view, I think before title insurance is find a good lawyer, right? Is you don't try to do this on your own by yourself. Find a good lawyer, speak with friends and family who have worked with someone, I mean, before you became a partner of mine, I mean, it's easy for me to say now, I just go to Sonia because you're my business partner and I trust you. But prior to you joining our firm, whenever I've had a real estate transaction, I didn't really go into the phone book or do a Google search or whatever. It was going to family, going to friends. Who have you worked with? So is that basically, or how could someone protect themselves if they're meeting with a lawyer potentially? Is there any red flags that a client can identify, or in working with a realtor, are there any red flags there? And I would say the majority of the professionals, majority of realtors, majority of lawyers, majority of mortgage brokers are, honest. They're doing legitimate business. It's always that very small percentage, but unfortunately, that very small percentage, when they're impacted, it's a very significant impact. So
it's significant.
Yeah. And anything that you can, in terms of advice you can provide and what they can look out for, gut feel, or is there anything else beyond just gut feel?
I always say that. I always say go with your gut first and foremost. If there's someone that you're meeting and it just doesn't feel quite right, then don't be represented by them. There's a reason why it doesn't feel just right. I had a client recently. They were getting into an assignment agreement. The other side was acting a bit peculiarly. They just said, it doesn't feel right. And I said, yeah, then walk away. So that first feeling is probably a good one. In general, follow the advice of people that you trust. So say you have a trusted friend in your life and they have used somebody. Go with them, meet with them. It might not be the right fit, but at least start there. At least it's someone reputable. As far as an agent or a broker or a lawyer. In regards to, if you don't really have any sort of circle of people in your life, then go to a professional that you trust and ask them, hey, do you know anybody that I could have me assist me in this transaction? And I bet you most of them have a handful of people in their lives that can help you in being the agent on the file or the lawyer on the file. And at least you have someone recommended and someone vetted. When you go to someone new, then that's the situation. If, for instance, you're in a transaction and the other side is recommending a lawyer to you, that's a red flag. The other side should not be recommending a lawyer to you. That could potentially mean that someone is actually also involved in the transaction. So go to reputable people who have knowledge about the industry that they're in and are willing to really go the extra mile for you. Because, in my practice, real estate, let's say a real estate file can be very ordinary, but not in our practice. In our practice, every single file is scrutinized. We have to look at every single part of the transaction. And because we have been doing it for so long, there's this spidey sense that comes up whenever something is wrong on a file. It's like, there's something wrong with this file. I can't determine what it is. And so you look at it even with more of a critical eye. And it's one of those things with experience, with knowledge. And because we care so much about our clients and not getting them into this situation, we want to make sure that everything is done properly. But even then, there is the potential of getting duped. Like recently, you probably heard in the news, there was this lawyer who was representing the sellers, who was representing the fraudsters. And, he had done everything right. And then right at the end of the transaction, when he deposited the money into the account, the bank told him, by the way, did you know that this account was just opened recently? And right when they told him that, he froze that deposit that he had made. He went physically to the property that was sold. He took a look at the property. There was mail overflowing out of the mailbox. There was a few other peculiar things going on with the property. He had chatted with neighbors, and the neighbors informed them that, no, the owners have been overseas for months. There's no way they could have sold their property. And then, everything was put to sort of the title insurance and the police and whatnot. But even then, even when you do all your checks and balances, it happens. What's being implemented now by the Law Society and the title insurance companies actually is an ID verification process. which is going to be quite onerous. It's going to be mandatory come January next year. And anything done online will have to go through this scrutinizing process. And one of the things is going to be to determine how long the bank account that they're using to make the deposit to, so say the vendor's sale proceeds, how long it's been open. And if it's been open for less than 6 months, then they're going to flag it and investigate further. So there's steps being put in place to protect buyers, sellers from fraud. It's just, you can, as a homeowner, you can only do so much. You can protect your identity, you can get title insurance, you can get all the reliable professionals around you. And at the end of the day, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But at least you are protected from, being paid back and title, reassigned as well. So,
so 2 points that I'd like to make, actually. So the first one, when it comes to, criminal behavior, unfortunately, it's going to happen. You can do everything right, as you said, and sometimes it still happens because criminals are also getting a little bit more smarter. It's just the reality. I mean, in my business, I had a very good friend of mine who used to work for the Toronto Stock Exchange, and his job was the head accountant who would actually, when you were a company looking to list your company on the stock exchange, you have to go through this whole audit process and verification process. And I remember him saying to me, I don't know if people remember the company Bre-X, which was that fake mining company. He was on that file. And he said to me, he said, Jim, we literally had a kitchen table stacked up to the ceiling full of documents verifying, the mines themselves from global experts. He said, we had financial documents. We went through it with a fine-tooth comb, and at the end of the day, it still ended up, being a fraudulent situation. So basically his point was you have to put all the systems in place, make it very difficult for them, and, hopefully prevent them from getting to that point. So that's the first thing that I'd like to say. Second point, and now that I'm aging, I've now forgotten what my second point was. Actually, no. Now I remember. So it's still there. I still got it. You went back to, you'd said, if so, just to clarify, if a lawyer recommends another lawyer to transact on the other end, that could potentially be a fraudulent situation or a red flag, so to speak. But you're not saying, if the realtor refers a mortgage broker and a mortgage broker refers a realtor or a real estate lawyer, that's not necessarily considered a red flag. Can you clarify that a little bit?
It all depends on the situation, right? So I actually refer other lawyers all the time because I trust them and I know that they're going to be excellent to work with. But if you don't know these parties and the the opposing lawyer is saying, well, go get ILA, independent legal advice from this person, or do that, and they are all involved, well, then that's a red flag. I only work with a tight-knit group of referral sources, like my real estate agents. So I have about 10 real estate agents that I work with who refer me clients. So I am on their trusted list. So that's not a red flag. But if you don't know the agent that you're working with, if you don't really, if they haven't been referred to you, if you're having those, feelings like this is not a right fit, or this is seeming a bit, sketchy, then, perk your ears up, like assess the situation a little bit and maybe speak with somebody else just for the sake of, getting another opinion or, another person there to perhaps assist. Yeah.
Right, but pressure tactics could be considered a red flag. Something, right? So
Absolutely.
if a realtor is, being a little bit too, or applying too much pressure, or the mortgage broker or agent, as an example, that could be something that someone should look at and say, why is there all this pressure behind this transaction?
Absolutely.
And consider that to be a red flag. And even another one, and we've seen this for years, unfortunately, if someone declares their income to be X amount, and all of a sudden they look at maybe the final file, and if it's in there and it shows a much different number, that should be a red flag for them as well, that there's just something not right there, right? So that would be doctoring of documents as another example.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, all of this, look out for it, pay attention to it. And, us as the professionals at the end of the day, have to be very cognizant of all those nitty-gritty little details, and like I said before, because I work with John and he's the mortgage broker and passes files on to me, if ever I have any doubt, I just go over to John and say, this doesn't look right. What's going on here? Can you explain this to me? And then we sort of double check sort of each other's work as well, which is good, so that I have fuller knowledge. And then I'm able to sort of transact the situation with, certainty that this is legitimate and we can proceed. Yeah.
Good. I don't want to put a damper on everybody out there, because obviously navigating the real estate market is difficult, but just like you'd go see a doctor or anybody, you want to see one or two specialists, and that kind of goes through other areas. Financial, it's not always that somebody's a right fit to work with us, but it's about doing their due diligence and making sure that they're feeling good about themselves and making the right decision. And again, obviously you can, as the real estate person you had mentioned, showed up the doorstep to make sure that this is a legitimate business, or again, looking towards people that they trust. Do you, you had mentioned that the Law Society was doing some of these changes to be preventative. Are there any other things that clients can do, whether it's following a blog or anything, to really be up to date on some of the things that are going on in the world in the news?
Yes. So in regards to fraud, title and insurance providers are putting out a lot of information on this. So blogs, visit their website, and you can glean a lot of information as to what to do with your financial records, how to protect your ID, all of that. And they're a wonderful source for this information, because they're ultimately getting the claims. So they want to stop them, right? They don't want to pay these out. They want to stop them in their tracks, right? So they're the source of, if they're going to give you the A to Z on what to do and how to protect yourselves, it's the title insurance providers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And anything else, Sonia, you'd like to add? I mean, it's a lot of information. Unfortunately, again, it's the reality of the world that we live in today. I think that COVID has probably, added a little bit of fuel to this type of criminal behavior, because there was a period of time where we couldn't meet in person, and now we've kind of adapted to transacting virtually. So I would suspect that, COVID probably has been, something that's fueled a lot of this. But anything else to add, to summarize? From my point of view, I would just say, find a good lawyer, work with trusted people. And, that's all I can say.
Yeah, perhaps a lawyer that may be a taekwondo champion or something like that. I heard in a previous life you're a taekwondo champion, so maybe add that to your. You've just been lawyered, plus a taekwondo champion that can help make sure that everything goes smoothly and no one gets out of hand.
A little fierceness, I guess. Yeah. So being a little driven, and training taekwondo taught me to be very, very driven, but also defensive. So always have a good defense strategy. Always be looking for that thing that doesn't look right, the way the foot is positioned or whatever it is. Otherwise, you might get a blow. So it definitely translates into real estate, and being very, very detail oriented, and looking for the stuff that just doesn't look right, that we can sort of defend against. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
My mom wanted me to get into Taekwondo when I was younger.
No, we could have had some sparring matches in the office.
Well, with my hip and my knees, forget that you'd win all the time anyway. But the reason why I said no is I couldn't just stand the smell of the feet. It was so bad.
I won't even go there. I still have nightmares of walking into my gym, and yeah, that scent was definitely off-putting. But that's why I never wanted a foot in the face, right? That's why I was like, no way, you're not kicking my face because your feet are too stinky.
With some of them, you didn't even need for the foot to actually connect with the face. Just had to just kind of like hover near the nose, and it'd be a good knockout punch.
Now we could also start a rumor that you sparred with, say, Chuck Norris, and that would just add to it. So, that is Jean-Claude Van Damme.
I did spar with Catherine Winnick, who is the actor in Vikings. And,
really?
Yeah. She was my classmate for years and years, for as long as I trained, yeah.
How did I not know that in the 12 years that I've known you?
At this point of the episode, the internet dropped. Jim and Ryan were not able to sign off at the end of the episode. If you liked what you heard, please like and share this episode. If you have questions for Sonia, she can be reached at sonia@tvhgroup.ca or www.tvhgroup.ca. Jim and Ryan also encourage you to download the TvH Financial mobile app, where you can access additional financial resources for free. You will receive notifications when new articles or podcasts are available. You can listen to the podcast through the app and also book an appointment with Jim or Ryan. Thank you for your time and for watching and listening to the Tortoise and Hare Financial Podcast.